I wasn't researching underwater construction disasters. I was looking into industrial accidents during the early 1900s, worker safety violations, the standard grim documentation of an era before OSHA. But then I found something in the Case Western Reserve University archives that made me stop. Between 1898 and 1916, Cleveland dug tunnels under Lake Erie, not near the shore, not shallow water passages, deep tunnels extending 4 miles into the lake, 40 feet below the lake bed. And 58 workers died building them. 4 gas explosions, 1 catastrophic fire, rescue attempts that killed the rescuers, men buried under hundreds of feet of mud and debris, all to access water. That's the official explanation. Water intake tunnels. Cleveland needed clean drinking water, so they tunneled deeper and farther into Lake Erie. Except the scale doesn't quite match that explanation. The first tunnel was completed in 1874, 5 feet in diameter, 40 feet below the lake bed, extending from the shore to a water intake crib about 1 mile into Lake Erie. The official reason? Pollution. By the 1860s, the Cuyahoga River and the lake it flowed into had become so contaminated from industrial waste and sewage that residents were complaining of tainted water. The solution was to go farther out, build a crib structure in the lake where the water was presumably cleaner, tunnel underneath the lake bed to connect it to the pumping station on shore. Reasonable engineering response to an urban pollution problem. But 1 mile out proved insufficient. The pollution spread. By the 1890s, a second tunnel was needed. Then in 1898, they began a third tunnel. This one extending 3 miles into the lake. 3 miles, not 300 feet, not half a mile. 3 miles into Lake Erie, 40 feet below the lake bed. That's when the deaths started. The third tunnel construction began in 1898 with standard tunneling methods. Workers descended into a vertical shaft and worked horizontally outward under the lake bed. The first gas explosion occurred in 1898. Workers hit a pocket of methane. The ignition killed multiple men. A second gas explosion in 1898, more deaths. A third explosion in 1901, more workers dead. A fourth explosion in 1902, 4 separate gas explosions in 4 years. 28 workers killed. From the Case Western Reserve archives, 4 gas explosions took the lives of 28 tunnel workers between 1898 and 1902. 28 men dead from hitting gas pockets under Lake Erie. That's not a normal construction hazard. That's encountering something that shouldn't be there. The worst incident came on August 4th, 1901. Not an explosion this time, a fire. It started in a temporary crib built to house workers, a structure floating on the lake surface directly above where the tunnel was being dug. Cinders from a boiler stack ignited the crib. 5 men burned to death. 3 more drowned trying to escape into the lake. 1 rescuer lost his life trying to reach the trapped workers. 9 men dead in 1 night. The crib was a floating barracks where tunnel workers lived while working the project. It sat on Lake Erie, directly above a vertical shaft that descended 127 feet to the tunnel below. Workers would be lowered in a cage down the shaft. At the bottom, they'd enter the tunnel and dig horizontally outward under the lake bed. When the crib caught fire, the workers inside had nowhere to go. Jump into the lake and drown, stay and burn, descend into the tunnel and hope rescue came before the smoke did. All of this is documented in contemporary newspaper accounts. The Cleveland Plain Dealer covered it extensively. Local historians maintained detailed records. This wasn't hidden. This was public. But here's what's interesting. Despite 37 deaths between 1898 and 1901, they kept digging. The tunnel was completed, 3 miles out into Lake Erie, and then in 1914, they started a 4th tunnel. The 4th tunnel was even more ambitious, 4 miles out. The longest underwater tunnel Cleveland had attempted. It started with praise. Newspapers lauded the improved safety record. No major accidents in the first 2 years of construction. Modern techniques, better engineering. Lessons learned from the disasters of 1898 to 1902. But on the night of July 24th, 1916, about at 9:22 p.m., a work crew hit another gas pocket. The explosion was massive. From the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission investigation, methane gas that vented during the construction of an underground tunnel ignited and exploded, burying 9 men under hundreds of feet of mud and construction debris under Lake Erie. Concrete blocks lining the tunnel were forced through the ceiling. Railroad tracks mangled, boards, wires, and machinery thrown into an indistinguishable mass on the tunnel floor. All the lights went out except one near the airlock chamber. 9 workers killed instantly. And here's the detail that stands out. About 20 workers were stationed at the crib structure directly above the tunnel when the explosion occurred. None of them heard it. An explosion powerful enough to force concrete blocks through the tunnel ceiling, to mangle railroad tracks, to bury 9 men under hundreds of feet of debris. And the workers 127 feet directly above heard nothing. The rescue attempts began immediately. Assistant Superintendent John R. Johnston led the first team. 7 men descended into the tunnel to search for survivors. They made it 132 feet before 5 of them collapsed from toxic fumes. Only Johnston and 1 other man made it out alive. The tunnel filled with gas from the explosion. The rescuers never saw it coming. Gus Van Duzen, superintendent of tunnel construction, led the second rescue attempt. He brought 12 workers who had just finished their shift in another tunnel. None of them were told that the first rescue team lay dead in the tunnel. Van Duzen and 9 workers were lowered down the shaft. They entered the tunnel and moved forward until they encountered the 5 men left behind from Johnston's team. That's when Van Duzen's group started collapsing. 10 more dead. 20 men total, now killed or dying in the tunnel. Additional rescue attempts through the night saved 2 men from Van Duzen's party. Everyone else remained trapped in the gas-filled tunnel. By dawn, 20 men were dead or dying underground. That's when someone called Garrett Morgan. Morgan was a black inventor living in Cleveland. He had recently patented a safety hood designed to help firefighters deal with smoke inhalation. The device was a canvas hood that covered the entire head with tubes that dangled low to the ground. Hot smoke and toxic fumes rise. Cleaner air stays near the floor. The tubes filtered the lower air through the mask. A Cleveland police officer who had seen Morgan demonstrate the safety hood convinced authorities to contact him. At 4 a.m. on July 25th, Morgan arrived at the scene, barefoot, wearing pajama bottoms, carrying as many safety hoods as he could gather. He, his brother Frank, and volunteers made 4 trips into the tunnel. They saved 2 workers trapped underground. They recovered the bodies of 4 others. Morgan's safety hood worked. The men who went in with Morgan survived. The men who went in without it died. The final count, 21 dead, 9 others injured. Garrett Morgan became a hero. Except he didn't receive recognition for years. The Cleveland newspapers barely mentioned him. The Carnegie Medal Committee denied him recognition. He was black, and in 1916 Cleveland, that mattered more than the lives he saved. It wasn't until 25 years later that the water treatment plant was renamed in his honor. It wasn't until 2016, on the 100th anniversary, that descendants of the victims and descendants of the rescuers met for the first time. All of this is documented. Cleveland State University maintains extensive archives. The Cleveland Public Library has photographs. The Case Western Reserve Encyclopedia of Cleveland History has detailed articles. This happened. Every detail is verifiable. The question is why? Why tunnel 4 miles into Lake Erie? The official explanation, pollution. Cleveland's industrial growth contaminated the Cuyahoga River and the western basin of Lake Erie. The only way to access clean water was to go farther and deeper. But look at the progression. 1874, 1 mile out. 1890s, still inadequate, second tunnel needed. 1898, 3 miles out. 1914, 4 miles out. Each tunnel farther than the last. Each one deeper, each one more dangerous, and each one encountering the same problem: gas pockets, methane venting from the lake bed, explosive methane, in concentrations high enough to kill workers and powerful enough to bury men under hundreds of feet of debris when ignited. Natural gas pockets. Under Lake Erie, that's the official explanation. Except Lake Erie is a glacial lake, relatively young in geological terms, formed about 10,000 years ago when glaciers retreated. Natural gas deposits form from organic matter compressed over millions of years. Ancient seabeds, swamps that existed long before humans, layers of dead plant and animal material subjected to heat and pressure deep underground. Lake Erie sits on bedrock that's been scraped clean by glaciers. The lake bed is clay, sand, and glacial till, not ancient organic deposits. So where was the gas coming from? The 1916 explosion report describes it precisely. Methane gas that vented during construction. Not leaked, not seeped, vented. Like it was under pressure, like the tunnel broke through into something that released it. The explosion buried 9 men under hundreds of feet of mud and construction debris. Hundreds of feet of material. That's not a small gas pocket causing a localized collapse. That's a massive structural failure. Something giving away catastrophically. And the concrete blocks lining the tunnel were forced through the tunnel ceiling. That's pressure from below. Something pushing upward with enough force to punch concrete blocks through reinforced tunnel walls. What were they digging into? The timeline is worth noting. First tunnel, 1874, 1 mile out. No reported disasters. Third tunnel, 1898 to 1902, 3 miles out. 4 gas explosions, 28 dead. Fourth tunnel, 1914 to 1916, 4 miles out. 1 massive explosion, 21 dead. The farther they went, the worse it got. Like they were approaching something, getting closer to something that shouldn't be disturbed. And the dates, 1898 to 1916. The exact same period as the street raisings, the orphan trains, the asylum constructions, the institutional consolidations, the history standardizations. The same 18 years when cities across America and Europe were burying their original street levels, moving hundreds of thousands of children and building infrastructure at a scale that required extraordinary labor and resources. And Cleveland was tunneling 4 miles under Lake Erie, losing 58 workers in the process for water. I found something else in the archives. According to Cleveland historians, about 70 men total died in waterworks tunnel operations before 1916. 70 men. Most of them Irish and German immigrants, working-class laborers who took dangerous jobs because they needed the money. Their names are recorded, the circumstances of their deaths documented, the newspaper coverage extensive. This wasn't covered up, this wasn't hidden. It was filed under industrial accidents, construction hazards, the cost of progress. But when you look at what they were actually doing, the deaths start to feel less like accidents and more like consequences. Consequences of digging where they shouldn't have been digging, of tunneling into something that fought back with gas explosions and structural collapses, of going 4 miles into Lake Erie, 40 feet below the lake bed, and hitting something that killed 21 men in a single night. The tunnels are still there. The Garrett A. Morgan water treatment plant still operates. Water still flows through those tunnels from cribs 4 miles out in Lake Erie. The fourth tunnel, the one that killed 21 men in 1916, was completed despite the disaster. They finished it, brought it into operation, used it for decades. Whatever they hit in 1916, whatever vented that methane, whatever buried those men under hundreds of feet of debris, they kept digging through it because they needed the water. That's the official story. But think about the scale. 4 miles out, 40 feet below the lake bed, through bedrock, through gas pockets that shouldn't exist in a glacial lake, through something that exploded with enough force to drive concrete blocks through reinforced tunnel walls, and they kept going, kept digging, kept sending men down, kept building despite 58 documented deaths and dozens more injured, for water intake or for something else they needed to reach. The 2016 ceremony was the first time descendants of the victims and rescuers met, 100 years after the disaster. That's how long it took to bring them together. Sandra Morgan. Garrett Morgan's granddaughter spoke at the event. She held back tears addressing the crowd. It was amazing to be a part of that because we all have our sides of that story. It was really very touching in the first time. It took 100 years to pull us all together. 100 years to acknowledge what happened. 100 years to honor the men who died 4 miles under Lake Erie in a tunnel that shouldn't have needed to be that deep, that far out, or that deadly. Barbara Lind attended too. Her grandfather was Gus Van Duzen, the tunnel chief who led the second rescue attempt and died in the tunnel. All these descendants, all these families, all connected by a single night in 1916 when workers hit a gas pocket that killed 21 men. And the tunnels kept operating. The water kept flowing. The official explanation never changed. Industrial accident, construction hazard, natural gas pocket under Lake Erie. File it away. Move on. Except the families never moved on. They carried the loss for a century before anyone thought to bring them together. You can verify everything I've told you. Case Western Reserve University maintains detailed archives of the Cleveland Waterworks tunnel disasters. The Encyclopedia of Cleveland History has comprehensive articles. Cleveland State University's Michael Schwartz Library has the Cleveland Press Collection with photographs from 1916. The Carnegie Hero Fund Commission investigation report is available. It documents every rescue attempt, every decision, every death. Newspaper archives from the Cleveland Plain Dealer and Cleveland Press covered the disasters extensively. Nothing was hidden. The deaths were public. The explosions were news. Garrett Morgan's heroism was eventually recognized. All of it documented. All of it verifiable. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is why they kept digging. Why does a city tunnel 4 miles into a lake for water? Modern water intake systems don't require that. They use different technologies, shorter distances, safer methods. Cleveland in 1914 chose to dig the longest, deepest, most dangerous underwater tunnel they'd ever attempted. And when it started killing workers, they kept going. When gas explosions killed 28 men between 1898 and 1902, they completed the tunnel and started planning a longer one. When the 1916 explosion killed 21 men in a single night, they finished the tunnel anyway. 58 documented deaths, dozens more injured, families destroyed. Rescue attempts that killed rescuers, all for water intake, or all because they needed to reach something 4 miles out, something 40 feet below the lake bed, something that required tunneling through gas pockets and structural instabilities, something worth 58 lives. The tunnels extend in a specific direction, 4 miles northeast from the shore, into the deeper part of Lake Erie, not toward shallow water where intake would be easier, not toward areas with known clear water sources, into the deep, where the lake bed drops away, where glacial geology creates conditions different from the western basin. And every tunnel went deeper and farther than the last, like they were following something, reaching for something, trying to access something specific, not just water. Water was the stated purpose, the official justification. The reason they could give for spending millions and accepting dozens of deaths. But when you look at the engineering choices, the distances involved, the persistence despite catastrophic losses, it starts to feel like water was the excuse, not the goal. This is the same pattern we keep seeing. Massive infrastructure projects during the same 1850 to 1920 window. Projects that seem excessive for their stated purposes. Projects that cost extraordinary amounts in both money and lives. Cities raising their streets 10 to 20 feet and burying original ground levels for sewage and flood control. Orphan trains moving 250,000 children across the country for charity and adoption. Asylums housing hundreds of thousands for mental health treatment. And Cleveland digging tunnels 4 miles under Lake Erie for water. Each project has a stated purpose. Each one is documented. Each one makes sense individually. But together, in the same decades, all requiring massive labor, all involving burial or relocation or underground construction, they start to look coordinated, like different aspects of the same transformation, different pieces of the same project. A project that required digging deep, building far, moving populations, and burying what came before. The workers who died have names. The 1916 disaster victims are recorded. Harry Vokes, 27, acting foreman. John Patton, the 9 workers killed in the initial explosion, the rescuers who died trying to save them. Most were Irish and German immigrants, working-class men taking dangerous jobs for wages. They didn't know what they were digging into. They just knew the pay was decent, and Cleveland needed the work done. When the gas exploded and buried them under hundreds of feet of debris, they didn't understand what had killed them. Just that they'd hit something, broken through into something, released something that shouldn't have been released, and then they were gone. Their deaths filed as industrial accidents. Their families left with newspaper clippings and grief. The tunnels completed anyway, the water flowing through, the project continuing as if 58 dead workers were just the cost of progress. Maybe that's all it was. The cost of progress. Industrial accidents in an era before safety regulations. Or maybe they were casualties of something else. Something that required reaching 4 miles into Lake Erie, no matter the cost. Something worth 58 lives. Something we're not supposed to ask about. The Garrett A. Morgan Water Treatment Plant still operates. The tunnels still carry water from cribs 4 miles out in Lake Erie. The system works. Cleveland has clean drinking water. The official story held, water intake tunnels. Pollution response, standard urban infrastructure. And 58 workers are still dead, their deaths documented, their families still carrying the loss, their graves in Cleveland cemeteries, all for water. Or all for whatever they found 4 miles under Lake Erie that exploded with enough force to kill 21 men in a single night. The evidence is there, in the archives, in the photographs, in the newspaper accounts, in the engineering records, all filed under Waterworks Tunnel Disasters. All explained, all accounted for, all perfectly reasonable, except for the gas pockets that shouldn't exist, and the depth that seems excessive, and the deaths that kept happening, and the persistence despite catastrophic losses, except for the feeling that water was the excuse, not the reason, except for the question nobody asks. What were they really digging for 4 miles under Lake Erie?